the way that they look at it, the powers that be, they've got to have companies like that that spearhead and generate the destruction that will make us all so desperate that we will agree to having our own genes modified, our DNA recoded and changed.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report. Just a quick note before we begin. The Brave browser link is below this video. For those who have not downloaded it, you do have the right to browse the internet privately with a browser that won't spy on you like Google's Chrome will. And the Brave browser does just that. And if you download it and use it for 30 days or more, the folks at Brave will pay SGT Report a small stipend. So we really do appreciate your support. And by the way, for those of you who have downloaded it, more than 50% of you never correctly installed it on your computer. So in order to use the Brave browser, you've got to download it and then install it and then choose it as your browser. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's a great browser. So the link is below this video. All right, guys, now with that said, here's the update. A very, very important interview with groundbreaking information with my friend and researcher, Sofia Smallstorm. First of all, sadly, the audio on my end goes bad pretty much right out of the gate because something malfunctioned here on my little audio board, but Sophia's audio is quite good. So sit back and enjoy. This is about Monsanto, one of the world's most evil corporations, and their horrific Grim Reaper product, Glyphosate, or Roundup. Monsanto and parent company now Bayer are losing money hand over fist because they're being sued for causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in people that have used Roundup throughout their lives. And these companies are losing multi-million-dollar judgments. That's the good news. The bad news is glyphosate is everywhere. It's in our water, it's in our food, and now sadly, it's in our bodies. And my friend and researcher, Sofia Smallstorm, joins me right now to break it all down. It's a much bigger story than just non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, isn't it, Sophia?
Yes, Sean, I'm sorry to say it is much bigger. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's a pleasure to have you back. We've been friends for a long time. And guys, for those who aren't familiar with Sophia, Sophia is the mind behind the wonderful documentary that helped wake me up to the horrors of 9/11, and that one is called 9/11 Mysteries. She was far ahead of the game before most of us were even aware that a third building fell on 9/11, World Trade Center 7. Sophia's website is sophiasmallstorm.com and avatarproducts.com. Do I have that right, Sophia? Avatar Products?
Yes, and Sophia is with an F, S-O-F-I-A. Sometimes people put a P-H, so F, S-O-F-I-A, smallstorm.com.
All right, and we'll talk about Avatar Products again towards the end of the program or whenever you want to get into it, Sophia. The point is that glyphosate is everywhere. It's in everything. It's in the groundwater. It's in the food we eat. It's in our bodies at this point. By the way, Sophia, I think it's really fascinating that Bayer bought Monsanto, probably knowing that this was going to happen. I have no idea why they'd want to pay $66 billion for a company that only has made poison all of these years. But it stands to reason when you realize that Bayer was behind the distribution of factor VIII, AIDS-tainted blood for transfusions for hemophiliacs. I mean, these companies are quite the evil pair.
They are really imposing their destructive agendas on us, and we are completely unwitting. So I think by way of this broadcast and others that I'm doing and then you're doing on your own, we can help to educate people just so they can start taking some precautionary preventive measures to preserve their health. Because I'm going to tell you some very interesting things about glyphosate. You know, as you mentioned, it is the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup, which is said to be a weed killer. Yet, something like 99.9% of the glyphosate circulated in the world does not meet with a weed ever. So last year, 4 billion kilos of glyphosate were sold. And in 2016, it was about 2 billion. It was taken off patent. I have read 2000 and then again 2007. And now a lot of it is manufactured in China. It is not just used as an herbicide, a weed killer, and I'll explain more about what it does in biology, and I will break it down very simply so that it's basic concepts and not a lot of mumbo-jumbo science. But it is also used as a desiccant, which means it dries crops out right before harvest. And this is useful to farmers who are ignorant because the crops, what glyphosate does is it starves plants of water. It gives them something like plant AIDS, AIDS, and it hurts their immune system. It gives them such a whack to their immune system that they start to wither and dry and perish. And that makes it easier to cut the wheat and to harvest these crops. It's on all the core crops that you could think of: rice, all the grain crops, oats. It's on the legumes, lentils, garbanzo beans. It's used on sugar cane, sugar beets. It's used everywhere. Whether the crop is GMO ready or not, it is used. Glyphosate is used right before harvest.
Well, that's horrifying, and I didn't know that. All right, let's do this. I want to do this for you, Sophia. As you know, I have the most supportive, responsive audience, I think, on all of YouTube, maybe in all of the world, and I can quantify that. What I want to do for you right now, Sophia, before I forget, is mention that product at Avatar Products. I think you called it Restore. You just told me about this before the call. I just want to pay it forward by giving you the opportunity to tell people there's a chance there is a product that may help you get the glyphosate out of your body. Just give us the pitch on that, and then we're going to get into this horror story, which I think paints the picture that this glyphosate issue is far, far worse than just causing cancer. So we'll get to that in a second. Just tell us quickly about Restore and how people can get it.
Yeah, Restore is a lignite extract. It's made from desert earth, from the American Southwest desert. It is formulated, created, it's the brainchild of Dr. Zach Bush, who is an amazing human being. And they just did a clinical trial. Results came out just a few weeks ago. If you take Restore, it looks like weak Lipton tea. It tastes almost like there's no taste. And if you take a tablespoon a day, you will actually shut your gut wall down in terms of the tight junctions between the cells. You will stop leaky gut. And this is how glyphosate gets into your body, because it's indigestible. And your body, as soon as it gets into your digestive tract, your body goes, what? I can't break this stuff down. And so the gut wall opens up so that water from the bloodstream could come in, and you can flush the glyphosate out through your, the other end of your body. But when your gut wall opens like that immediately, because glyphosate is not possible to process biologically, then guess what? Some of that glyphosate gets out into your bloodstream, where it begins to be incorporated in very harmful ways. So the product Restore closes your gut wall down, especially if you take it before meals, a teaspoon before each meal. And the results of the clinical trial on humans have shown that within 2 weeks, just 2 weeks of using Restore, it eliminates 23% of the glyphosate in your system.
Okay. And that's available at avatarproducts.com. How much is it?
Well, people might think it's expensive to start with. The 32-ounce bottle is $70. Mm-hmm. And that $70 will last you 2 months. And it makes such a difference, Sean. I mean, I've had people tell me that they've had terrible digestive issues, all this pain, cramping, bloating. This is because your body is doing its best to get rid of this glyphosate stuff. And glyphosate totally confuses everything happening in your gut. I'll talk about how it affects the quadrillion bacteria that live in your gut, how dangerous it is to you because of that. But, within 2 weeks, within a few days, I've had people tell me that their gut pain has totally gone away and now they can function. Okay. And I'm not a practitioner. I can't give medical or health advice, but I can sell something. And that's what I've been doing. And if you order from Avatar Products, you get a free pump with that 32-ounce bottle. And you'll get another little gift or two. So I'm urging people to try it. And when you finally use it, you will realize that it's worth the $30, $35 a month because of all the changes it makes. And it's not just your gut. I'll try to explain how it affects your entire body and regulates your health.
All right. Guys, I've known Sophia for a long time, so this is just my way to pay it forward. She and I do not have a business arrangement regarding this product or any of her products on Avatar Products, but I do vouch for Sophia as a very knowledgeable and caring person. So if you want to support Sophia, that's one way to do it. Monsanto's Round Up, the glyphosate, it's not just in the water. It's not just in the food. It's not just everywhere in this environment. These people are Luciferians to the nth degree that they would have designed such a product and put it into use. I can't believe that things like this exist. Remember, this is the company that brought the Vietnamese Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. I mean, this company is a chemical production company masquerading as some sort of food company, big agribusiness. It's a big monstrous business, I'll tell you that much. And the glyphosate, if it's in your body and you're fortunate enough not to get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, some rare form of cancer, if you're one of the fortunate ones who doesn't get the cancer, it's still doing bad things to your body. And Sophia thinks it's doing bad things to horses as well. There is an unprecedented number of dead horses, racehorses, prized horses, horses worth many tens of thousands of dollars are dropping like we've never seen before. Listen to this.
It's been a rough start to the racing season at the Del Mar racetrack. It is in the first 8 days of the races, veterinarians have had to euthanize 7 horses.
The outrage growing over a staggering number of horses dying at one of the most famous racetracks in the world, Santa Anita. 21 have died there over the last 2 months. The track is closed now.
We want to go to more breaking news. Another racehorse has died at Santa Anita Park today. Racing had just resumed Friday following the deaths of 22 other horses. From protest outside Santa Anita Park today as the Derby continues inside. Many people, they're upset over the death of 23 horses.
The horses were running from grass to dirt around a corner on the track when the horse named Arms Runner went down. A second animal named La Sardane was right behind, and as a result, La Sardane couldn't avoid the fallen horse, so he tripped. He managed to get back up and is doing fine right now, but Arms Runner had to be put down today.
All right, I'll pause it there. This is deeply, deeply disturbing. Sophia has a theory. Sophia, I'll turn it over to you. There's more to the story, you think, as to why so many thoroughbred horses, strong race horses, are falling down, breaking bones, and having to be put down at an unprecedented rate.
Yes, Sean. You know, I read about that and I also heard about it on the news and I was quite horrified. These horses are not just worth tens of thousands of dollars. There are horses worth millions of dollars that are breaking their legs. They're having catastrophic limb injuries running on the track, not just in races, but in workouts as well. And the very striking thing about this is it's happening not just, one of the tracks is Santa Anita in Arcadia, California, which is Southern California, not too far from where I am. And that track is getting a lot of attention. Now get this, in the last 10 years, Santa Anita, that's the place where horses have had catastrophic limb injuries and have had to be put down. 500 horses, over 500 in 10 years. But when you look at the statistics across the country, it's very much the same. For instance, in 2015, 953 racehorses suffered catastrophic limb injuries and other kinds of breakdowns on the track. It's called equine breakdown. And that was, 2015 in America. And if you go to a website called horseracingwrongs.com, you can see the stats for other years. And this is happening in many different countries. Australia, there were a ton of, I shouldn't say a ton, I should be more specific than that. But I think it was Australian racetracks from the summer of 2016 to the summer of 2017, 1 horse death every 2.6 days. And that, again, from catastrophic limb injuries. So I said to myself, why is this happening? And it didn't take me long to put 2 and 2 together. I have been following the work of Dr. Stephanie Seneff at MIT on glyphosate and how it interferes in all different biological processes. She has written a series of papers, and they are titled Glyphosate, Pathways to Modern Diseases. The 5th paper she wrote is titled Amino Acid Analog of Glycine in Diverse Proteins. So what this explains is that glyphosate, which has a chemical name, N-phosphonomethylglycine. It is actually an analog of the simplest amino acid glycine. in all of biology. Biology has this beautiful amino acid, and as you know, amino acids are the components of proteins, and proteins are the structural materials of the body. And what I already knew from Dr. Seneff's work was that glyphosate and glycine are so alike that the body, when glyphosate is floating around in the body thinks, oh, this is the amino acid glycine, and it starts to build our proteins out of it. And when proteins are made with glyphosate, they fail, they malfunction, they start crashing and banging. The materials that they're in are brittle, they don't hold water, they're not supple, they're not flexible, they break. And that's when it hit me that these racehorses are falling down, stumbling. They're driven at 40 miles an hour. They weigh 1,000 pounds. And here they are galloping, galloping, galloping in a race. And then if they happen to stumble, sometimes they get bumped, they get jostled. But their skinny legs, thoroughbreds have very thin legs supporting all that weight. Those legs may actually have a bad injury. They may get some kind of a break or a tear, ligament tear. The keratin in the hoofs contains the glycine, which it ends up being glyphosate when it's misfolded by the body. And all the ligaments, the tendons, all the cartilaginous tissue in the bones, their makeup changes when glyphosate is in them instead of glycine. So horses have to be put down. It's very tragic when they have a bad leg injury because they can't stand on 3 legs. They develop a condition called laminitis when 3 working legs are all they have to support their 1,000 pounds of weight. And that condition makes it's an inflammatory condition. The bones of the legs will warp and buckle and push through the hoof, and then they'll get terrible infections, and then they will die anyway. So this is why racehorses have to be euthanized. In the old days, they were shot when they have a break or a very bad injury to their leg. So I actually contacted Dr. Seneff, and I'm going to say this. I thought in my naivete that I should make this known to the racehorse world, right? The horse racing world. I should just start calling. The chief equine veterinarian in California is Dr. Rick Arthur at UC Davis. He heads up the California Thoroughbred organization. He's the chief vet, and he is also the guy who gets to know about, he gets the reports of all the injuries and euthanizations on the California tracks. So I innocently looked him up. He's at UC Davis. There's his office phone number. And I dialed it just to see what would happen. And Sean, he was there. He picked up. And I was kind of shocked. And I said, Dr. Arthur, I'm calling to share some important information with you. It's about the very high incidence of racehorse deaths in California and elsewhere. Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Seneff of MIT on protein synthesis? That's how I put it, Sean. Mm-hmm. And this is what he said. He said, this doesn't have anything to do with glyphosate, does it?
You got to be kidding me.
Yeah. And he had mispronounced it, but I said, actually, yes, it does. And he said, not interested, thank you. And he hung up the phone.
Well, that's a very strange response. I wonder who got to him first. Yeah, he mispronounced it, number one, but number two, the information is obviously out there. People must be asking questions if it's gotten to his level.
Then I found out from somebody in our discussion group, because I immediately wrote to Dr. Seneff. I was sitting in complete shock. And I wrote her an email. I said, I can't believe this just happened. And she wrote back, and she immediately copied some other people in this discussion that has begun. We have a lab that tests for glyphosate in both horses and humans. If anyone's interested, it's HRI Labs in Iowa, Fairfield, Iowa, HRI Labs. And then we have a veterinarian or two, we have a breeder or two, we have horse owners, we've got people who detox horses. All this stuff is possible. And I learned from somebody in the group, are you ready? UC Davis has accepted $10 million from Monsanto.
Mm-hmm. There it is. Just like our wholly owned, bought and paid for regulative bodies in this country are supposed to protect shareholders against fraud, and nothing ever gets done about the silver and gold manipulation. They're supposed to protect us from bad vaccines. Nothing ever gets done about the mercury and the formaldehyde and the aluminum in the vaccines. They're supposed to protect us from GMO foods and poisoning our food supply. It's a revolving door of corporate heads at these regulatory bodies. You know, I just heard somebody say just the other day, the way these regulatory bodies work is that if you can work for one for, say, 10 years and you never are really too hard on the industry you're supposed to oversee, maybe a small fine here, a slap on the wrist there. After 10 years, when you get out of that regulatory body, you get a sweet job waiting for you at one of the corporations you were previously tasked with regulating. I mean, a sweet, sweet multi-$100,000 per year job with a big fat pension, or maybe you're put on the board of directors of one of these companies. That's what we're up against in this country. Wholly owned, bought and paid for regulatory bodies that are no longer regulating anything, which is why glyphosate is now in the food supply, the water supply, all over the world. I see here in your latest Avatar Update newsletter, which is just fantastic, that glyphosate is now the world's most prolific toxin. I mean, it's everywhere, folks. It's everywhere.
It is everywhere, Sean.
Let me ask you this, Sophia. So this stuff is everywhere. It's in horses. It's in us. I wonder when we're going to start seeing human athletes suffer similar fates. Because I guess we can extrapolate that if these terrible things are happening to thoroughbred horses worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, prize-winning horses that are well-fed and well cared for, I wonder when we may start to see horrific things happen to human athletes.
It's not when we may, Sean. We're seeing it. There's a massive increase in injuries to small children playing like Little League and out on the ball field and running around on playgrounds. The orthopedic injuries in young children has reached staggering numbers. And then there's another correlation, parallel. That is the number of knee replacements and hip replacements and joint issues that afflict people in their 40s now, even their 30s. I know so many people in their 50s that have already had their hips done and their knees done, and they talk about it, you know, like people 20 years ago used to talk about their bypass surgery. It's like, de rigueur, this is what happens to you. That was me showing off with my French. It's par for the course. It's part of life, right? You get a hip replacement. When are you going to have the other one done? Oh, I had mine done 3 years ago. But I want to point out to people, now this is very gruesome, and I apologize for bringing it up, but you asked about catastrophes to human athletes. There is a woman,
Is it a
young
gymnast?
woman. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to show this. It's
No,
horrifying.
no.
Yeah, but describe it. It's absolutely horrifying.
Okay, so she, her name is Samantha Serio, and she's 18 years old, and she did a double backflip in a performance. This was, I believe, April 7th. And she landed, now it is true that she landed poorly. She landed with straight legs, and she should have had bent legs. And her knees, both at the same time, dislocated, and she fell to the ground in absolute agony. Now, dislocation of the knee means that the knee bends the wrong way. Look at how your elbows bend, right? Your knees, instead of bending forward, her two knees bent backwards. They were the absolute opposite of what they should have been doing. And that was catastrophic ligament injury in the knee joint. And now my question was, all right, she did land poorly, but would her knees have held up better if she had no glyphosate in her ligaments? I don't know, I don't know what she eats. But the fact is that people eat so much conventional food today. If you're eating organic, you have a better chance of avoiding glyphosate. But if you're eating conventional flour, if you eat regular pizza, regular bread from sandwiches, if you pasta, anything, sugar products with glyphosate in them, your joints are going to start containing glyphosate instead of glycine. Now, I want to read what Dr. Seneff wrote to me. It's absolutely wondrous. It's about collagen. Now, we've all heard of collagen, right? Collagen is a protein. It's in your skin. It's in your bones, your muscles. It's in your blood vessels. Some of these horses, Sean, they're having coronaries on the racetrack. Their blood vessels are like blowing up because when your structural materials of your body are made with the wrong thing, they fail. They cannot hold up under stress. And that Samantha Serio landed under enormous stress on 2 knees that buckled the wrong way. And she cannot do any more gymnastics. She's finished. So what is collagen? How is it made? Collagen is a beautiful triple helix structure. It has strength, flexibility, and the ability to hold water. So the way the molecular configuration goes, every 3rd amino acid in collagen is glycine. And glycine is what holds the triple helix structure of collagen in place and gives it its suppleness. All right? And when that glyphosate gets in there instead of glycine, collagen is not supple anymore. It now will shatter, it will give, it will break, it will tear. Sean, I want to do the analogy that I do so much for people that they like, that they get a visual. So glycine is the simplest, sleekest, one of the most beautiful constructions in biology, this amino acid. Picture it like a beautifully designed car, some European sleek compact design, right off the assembly line. And imagine driving that car. Now take the exact same car, but one of the doors is stuck open, just jammed wide open. That is glyphosate. Glyphosate has the same construction as glycine, but in its nitrogen atom, it has this thing called a side chain, a methylphosphonyl side chain. Now, I can't explain too much about that because I honestly don't even know. It has to do with the way the material bonds and whatnot. But that's the door stuck wide open in the car that I'm making a comparison with. The glyphosate car would have a door just jammed wide open. Now imagine driving a car with the door wide open. You cannot maneuver it well. It's going to be buffeted by wind. It's going to hit things. It's going to cause accidents. It's not going to be supple and sleek and smooth. It's not going to be a pleasure to drive. And this is what happens with glyphosate in your proteins rather than glycine. The proteins literally crash and bang and burn and fail. And the body goes, oh, I made this wrong. Because it has the ability to recognize a mistake and redo it. And it tries to undo that protein that it made incorrectly and figure out what's wrong in it. But it can't do much with glyphosate in the recipe. It can't break down the glyphosate. Imagine the energy it takes in your body to disassemble and try to reassemble these errors, these erroneous proteins. So this is what's happening in our bodies. We have this thing that keeps crashing and burning and making our bodies break. And that's only one thing glyphosate does. There are more.
Let's just do a history lesson here for folks who are listening. I want people to understand, maybe you can help us with this. How did this glyphosate get into our food supply? Take us through the history, because what I think people need to understand is the nature of this horrific, I would really call them an evil satanic company, Monsanto. They were a chemical manufacturer. That's all they ever really did. And they wanted to do more. They wanted to rebrand their company. I think they hired some think tank PR company to work with them. And the PR company said, you know, what can we do? What do you want to do as a company moving forward? I think Monsanto's response was, we want to own the world's food supply. I'm paraphrasing. So what they did, Sophia, and correct me if I'm wrong, is they went about making foods Roundup ready so that farmers could buy the Roundup ready seeds that contain glyphosate in the cell structure of the food, so that when the farmers plant the corn, for instance, I think one of the Monsanto patented corns that they quote unquote own is Mon 186, going off memory. So when farmers plant the corn, they can then spray the fields with Roundup, thereby polluting the water supply and their own soils. But the plants don't die when they're sprayed with Roundup. Just the weeds die. And then we consume it. Jump in anytime here. I guess the point is that it's far more insidious than anyone ever dreamt, because corn, for instance, finds its way into everything. It finds its way into cereals, into breads, and there are other products that are Roundup ready. Soybeans, I think. Is that correct?
Yes. Soybeans, corn, canola, there's so much of it. It's in our oils. It's in, but the Roundup ready is that stuff, that Roundup gets sprayed on people's gardens, okay, in their lawns. It's terrible. But I'm going to just go to the very beginning. So glyphosate was first engineered in Switzerland in 1950, and it wasn't patented. It's an organophosphate, which means it's water soluble and it moves around very easily in living things, okay? So we have to remember, nature's toxins are sequestered in fat. They're fat soluble, and so they're harder to get around in living organisms, but not glyphosate. And I'm going to tell you something that's going to shock you. In the 60s, what did they use glyphosate for? It's a mineral chelator, which means it can strip minerals out of things. They used it in factory chimneys. They got all the crud out of factory chimneys. It's called flue dust, baghouse dust, by spraying them with glyphosate. So then glyphosate was again synthesized completely independently in 1974 by a Monsanto chemist, John Franz. And in the 70s, they began to use it, as this desiccant. They realized that it did a very, very dangerous thing to plants. It was used also to chelate plants because that immobilizes the minerals, the manganese, iron, cobalt, copper, boron, zinc, the trace minerals in plants, and that really hurts their defense system. It enables the soil-borne pathogens to thrive. But the worst thing it does in plants is it shuts down this organic chemistry process that they all have and need, called the shikimate pathway. The shikimate pathway is something very important to plants because it gives them immune strength. It produces 3 amino acids, and those amino acids we need. So Sean, complex life forms with very high energy needs sometimes outsource the manufacturing of materials that they require biologically to other life forms. And mammals have done this. Mammals need these 3 amino acids very, very, very badly. They're called phenylalanine, tryptophan, and tyrosine. And we don't make them ourselves. So it's the bacteria in your gut that make those amino acids, the quadrillion bacteria in your gut, and plants make them. So when plants and bacteria can't make these amino acids for themselves and for you, they start dying. And in the case of human beings, we need those amino acids because they are very important in our neurotransmitters like adrenaline, okay? Our stress response, this phenylalanine amino acid, we don't respond properly to stress because we don't have enough of it. Now, let me remind you of the zombie nature of the population out there.
This is so diabolical. They used to clean chimneys with this stuff, and now it's in our food supply. If you take a look at the Georgia Guidestones in the elite's desire to reduce population to 500 million people on this planet, and if you take a look at the vaccines program, I've said this time and time again lately, the vaccines program is not just about money for big pharma. It's about money and hurting people. It's about money and eugenics. I call them chemical weapons delivery systems because, Sophia, I'm telling you, if they still wanted to have big profits, they could take some of the most dangerous things out of these vaccines. They could remove the thimerosal mercury preservative. They could remove the aluminum. They could remove the formaldehyde. They could remove the aborted fetal tissue cells, but they don't. And now you're telling us that glyphosate was previously used to clean chimneys, and then they thought it would be a good idea to put it in the food on a cellular level. This to me is eugenics, and it can't happen by accident. Things like this are not done by accident, by people who care about other people.
No, and I'm going to explain where it's going, Sean. So the absence of these key amino acids makes us zombies. It destroys our ability to respond, and it destroys our ability to sleep. Think of the insomnia epidemics we have. It raises, if you don't have tryptophan, which is a sleep promoter, you're going to be an insomniac with a much higher aggression level, more anxiety, bigger appetite, carbohydrate cravings, depression. Okay, so tyrosine is an antidepressant. So just think about what is affecting people today. Can we connect that with the absence of these very important amino acids? And then the plant world and the bacterial world is just plain dying because they can't make these amino acids for themselves. And all of this, gluten intolerance, all the stuff that's going on today with digestive issues in people, that is not an intolerance of gluten. That's the inability of the body to deal with an amino acid in the gluten, which is an amino acid imposter. That gluten is indigestible in so many people because it contains glyphosate, not glycine. So this is why Restore helps, because Restore will shut your gut wall down and it will allow you to eliminate the offending material much more easily, and it will prevent that glyphosate from getting into your bloodstream and starting to do its handiwork in all of your tissues. So I want to mention another thing. One of the problems that glyphosate creates is this is very, very tragic. You've heard of anencephaly and microcephaly. Remember that they were telling us all about the babies with the small heads in Brazil, and they were blaming it on the Zika virus, right?
Okay, yeah.
These small heads are brain defects. There are certain tubes in the brain. I think they're called neural tubes or something like that. I'm looking for the word, but I'm not seeing it. But there are fetal tubes that have to develop in the brain in utero, and they don't happen. And in the case of anencephaly, the fetuses have no brain. Look it up on Google Images. Anencephaly, anencephaly. You will see these flattened skulls, these poor, tiny, tiny babies who have absolutely no brain. And that is the work of glyphosate. In Yakima, Washington, in 2010, they wanted to control the weeds in the irrigation ditches. And the people thought this glyphosate, this herbicide, was going to be safe. And they sprayed it in the ditches, and the epidemic of anencephaly, all the babies born with these flattened skulls, no brain, Sean, no brain at all. And so the microcephaly in Brazil is very similar. That's the small head. And the result is folate deficiency. You get these microcephalic babies with these tiny heads because they're using pesticides and herbicides and agrochemicals required by the companies they're working for. There is a very, very sad film online, and it is about the children in Argentina being born in the midst of tobacco plantations. And Philip Morris requires the tobacco farmers to use certain of these horrible chemicals on their tobacco. And the children are born with these horrendous deformities. So it's not just happening in the plant world, it's happening in births. It's causing mares to abort. And in the racehorse world, these horses are sold for millions and millions of dollars, and they're falling down on the tracks. And when they retire from racing, the stud fees are exorbitant. It's incredible. They're commanding $100,000, $200,000 in stud fees. Each of these retired, stallions that's descended from like Secretariat or War Admiral or some such very famous, very successful racehorse. So you're saying on your end, they're doing this very diabolical thing. And you also mentioned the Roundup Ready plants. And I just want to say this to you, Sean. I asked Dr. Seneff, how did they create Roundup Ready plants? And she told me that there is an insertion, a GMO insertion in the plant. They actually teach the DNA of the plant to recode. Instead of ordering in the protein synthesis recipe, instead of ordering glycine to be in the recipe for the protein, the DNA of the plant orders a substitute. In this case, it's alanine. It's a different amino acid. So they have taught the plant, they have changed its DNA with this GMO insertion, and they have taught the plant to look for a different amino acid, and that's what makes it immune to glyphosate. Because if its DNA doesn't ask for glycine, it will not incorporate glycine. So what's happening in us, I'm going to tell you this, People in the world are going to be so crippled with all this pain, and they will one day announce that, oh, it's this confusion the body makes between glycine and glyphosate. So they will do the same to us. This is called immunoprophylaxis by gene transfer. They will tell us, in all your horrendous pain, they will tell you, look, you want to have a way to get away from this pain, to get out of it? Well, we can give you a shot. They've got us used to injections and needles from the vaccines, but IgT will replace vaccines. They'll say, look, we'll just tell your DNA not to code for glycine, and then you will never involve glyphosate in your proteins. It'll just not come in. We will put a substitute amino acid in there. And God knows how that's going to fail on us, right? But it will at least stop this incorporation of glycine. So that is what I believe they're going to do. They are going to make it necessary for people in their own desperation to agree to this intrusion, this GMO insertion in themselves. And that's how we become Franken beings.
Oh my God. Well, welcome to transhumanism. Welcome to dystopia. I mean, the hits just keep on coming from these evil corporations, be it big pharma or big agribusiness. Monsanto, what a joke. Purchased by Bayer for some, I don't know, I'm seeing 62.5 billion or 66 billion. There's a couple different stories, and I don't even care. The point is that Bayer knew what they were getting, and they bought that despicable evil company anyway. Ask yourself why. Why would a pharmaceutical company buy a big agribusiness company, a chemical company? I'm telling you what, guys, this is so diabolical, and Sophia's not going to stop here. This is just the beginning of her research. She's going to stay on this story, and I recommend that everybody listening watch the documentary, The World According to Monsanto. If you want to see how evil this company is, and how evil their plans were, and how they carried it all out, and how they have so much blood on their hands. Many tens of thousands of farmers in India killed themselves after being rope-a-doped into this idea that they could buy these Monsanto seeds, and then they would get better yields and make more money. The opposite happened. And so many of these farmers ended up in debt that they killed themselves. There was a rash of suicides in India a few years ago when these poor farmers drank the Monsanto Kool-Aid and bought the products, and they couldn't afford to, and they all went under. It's this company, Sophia, I've said it so many times before, it is one of the top 5 most evil companies in the world, at least of the companies I know about, in my opinion.
Right. And Sean, the way that they look at it, the powers that be, they've got to have companies like that spearhead and generate the destruction that will make us all so desperate that we will agree to having our own genes modified, our DNA recoded and changed so that we don't suffer anymore, right?
I can see it coming. Yeah, it makes sense. Well, why don't you tell people what your plan is moving forward on this issue? It seems to me that you have many well-heeled, well-educated people out there in your neck of the woods, these people that raise these horses, these people that race these horses. It seems to me they would be very interested in your information. So I would suggest you start trying to wake them up. But just tell us about the next steps for you as it relates to the research and waking people up to this issue.
Well, Sean, I have tried to make headway in the horse racing world, and so have others in our group. And we have found that, a lot of people who own racehorses, these horses that are bought for $5 million before they ever run a race, and there are a lot of horses bought and sold during their short careers. And then there are sales of horses to stud farms and so forth. But these people are very orthodox and traditional. Somebody in our research group told me that you cannot get through to the vets, the equine vets, because if they didn't hear it in veterinary school, they don't want to detox horses. And my theory, and this has been borne out by other people that have been doing this, is that you can purge the glyphosate from a horse or an animal. First, you have to not let it live and sleep and eat in glyphosate sprayed hay and straw and oats. I mean, think about it. These poor horses, they sleep in straw that's been dried with glyphosate before harvest. That's the Sudan grass and alfalfa. It's the stem. And then they eat the alfalfa that was sprayed with glyphosate, and their oats have been sprayed as well. So the racehorse owners, in my view, they're already multimillionaires. How much harder is it going to be to try to procure clean, untreated with glyphosate feed and betting for your horse, right? You have to go to the lengths. If you want your horse to survive and win races and not break its legs when it's 3 years old, it's going to have the proper care. And then you can detox the horses with Restore is being used. There's an animal form of Restore that they make with silica in it. And they've done a clinical trial on cows already with great success. So hopefully they'll do one on horses soon. Now this is the company Restore. And there's also a compound called chlorine dioxide that Dr. Seneth did a show on with Carrie Rivera. I think you know Carrie Rivera.
Yeah, we love Carrie. Yep.
Chlorine dioxide is the resultant compound when you mix sodium, chlorite, and citric acid. This is popularly known as the MMS method.
It's being used to help, I can't say cure, but it's being used to help treat kids with autism. And there's some level of success in recovery being reported with the chlorine dioxide. So that's interesting that you brought it up.
Yes, and Dr. Senef said in this show with Carrie that chlorine dioxide is the only substance we know of that can actually hammer and bash glyphosate and break it apart into materials that submolecular materials that the body can use in a beneficial way. Now, I want to mention, you've heard the word antioxidant.
Yeah, let me mention something too for Carrie's benefit. If anybody wants to look into chlorine dioxide further, in my opinion, the best way to get it or purchase it is through ketocarrie.com. So that's Carrie Rivera's website. I've purchased some in the past from her. And so I'm just paying it forward again here, guys. If you want to support Carrie, ketocarrie.com. So go ahead, Sophia.
Thank you for telling us that. Now, Sean, chlorine dioxide is an oxidant. We always hear antioxidant, antioxidant, take more antioxidants. But antioxidants and oxidants are both used by the body in what's called redox signaling and the breakup of materials. The oxidants are very, very powerful agents that the body makes and that the body obtains from outside itself, like in what you eat. Oxidants will hammer and bash. They're literally like chisels. They'll break molecules apart, and the body will then take the subcomponents and use them in beneficial ways. So you need oxidants, and then antioxidants stop the work of oxidants. So that makes complete sense. You need a balance of those in your body. And with all the challenges we have today, environmentally, dietarily, so forth, we have a bit too much of oxidation going on. And that's why they tell us to keep taking antioxidants. But it so happens that chlorine dioxide is a special oxidant that breaks this glyphosate molecule apart. But you're going to have to figure out, you have to do your own research. I don't know of any dosage and can't suggest any, but you can certainly get Jim Humble's book. It's a very broad spectrum book on how to, I don't want to say treat, but how to deal with a lot of different conditions in your body using this MMS method that results in the formation of chlorine dioxide. So people are going to have to take a little effort and little time to help themselves. Restore is one easy way to start. It will stop that glyphosate from getting out of your gut into your system. It's really going to improve a lot of gut issues. You will not believe it, because I've gotten the emails from people on how quickly it does that. And then many, many other things, because Restore brings a carbon molecule, a vast range of them, into your body. And these carbon molecules don't exist in our current soil, don't exist at all. And we cannot obtain the right bacterial spectrum in our gut, and nor can we obtain the right carbon molecules that go with the bacteria in our gut from modern soil. So that's why Zach Bush went to the desert, because the earth in the desert is very, very old. It was never farmed in modern ways. It hasn't been stripped. It doesn't have any bacteria living in it, but these carbon molecules, they're called metabolites of carbon. The spectrum, the wide variety of these carbons is still in the desert soil. And that's what Restore brings to your body. And that enables an ancient electrical signaling to go on between the mitochondria in your cells and the quadrillion bacteria in your gut to regulate your health. So that's why Restore is so important. And it's really quite amazing you just give it a chance is all I say. The first thing people describe is how deeply they sleep. Then they notice massive changes in the quality of their digestion. And it really helps with mood. It helps with a lot of things. It may take a while, but the fact is, for the majority of people who've tried Restore, it has been quite beneficial.
All right, very good. And people can get that at your website, avatarproducts.com, right?
Right, and there are other things that are really important, magnesium, iodine, Restore. Those are the cornerstones of the products. That's why I sell all three of them, and I sell so many of them. And they're not expensive. Magnesium and iodine are fairly cheap. Restore is not expensive when you think about everything it does for you. But you also have to go to the lengths to clean up your life. You have to not be running out there and eating as much junk food as you can lay your hands on, because all you're doing is giving yourself constant setbacks. So it's important to understand that glyphosate does terrible things. I think the racehorses are a vehicle to make us see tragedy. Because Sean, I could stand on the street corner and I could pass out flyers and I could talk all day about Monsanto, Round Up, glyphosate. Roundup is on all the end caps in Home Depot. Does anyone care? The fact is that Costco, I heard, has pulled Roundup from its stores. But we could pull Roundup just the way that they took the Marisol out of vaccines. Does that make vaccines safe? No. So if you take all the herbicide, the glyphosate out of herbicides, and you still use glyphosate to dry crops out all over the world, all the core crops that we eat every day, then it remains in use. So that's a very sneaky thing, to draw attention just to the herbicide and ignore the fact that this thing is used to dry out plants before harvest.
All right, Sophia. Well, you know what? I would recommend people also check out your newsletter. It's written, first of all, it's very readable, but when you talk about, for instance, this issue, some of this in here is written like a scientific journal. I mean, you're no fool, Sophia. You know what you're talking about. And I would recommend people who want to support you, sure, they can go to your store, but they can also subscribe to your newsletter. How do they do that?
Right. On sophiasmallstorm.com, there is a menu tab to the left that says newsletter, and you can check out some past issues. The newsletter is by subscription, so you actually have to give me a minimum donation of $50 a year. And you get your once a month snail mail, hard copy. This way people can really sit down and read it. I know people who take themselves out to dinner when they get the newsletter because they want to be left alone and they want to read it in peace. It's not going to be easy to read if you do it as a PDF on your computer, which is why I don't email it. So thank you for anyone who's interested. I've just written an amazingly wild newsletter. These newsletters are like racehorses. All I have to do is get on the back of the topic and then it gallops off with me. So another new one is coming. And Sean, I'm going to comp you on my newsletter. You will be getting it monthly, whether you ask for it or not. So I just would love to share it with people like you, hosts, and then we can do shows. And people who don't want to pay for it, occasionally I will do a show on a newsletter, and that way you get the content anyway.
All right. Sounds good. I appreciate that, Sophia. Well, very good. I appreciate your time today. And for those of you who are still with us after this long but important call, I think it was a gripping one. Please do share it with others. We've got to get the word out on this, especially as it relates to the food supply. And I think one of the things everybody can do is try to avoid GMO foods. That's number one. Drink clean, purified water. That's number two. All right, Sophia, thank you so very much. I appreciate the newsletter. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. You know how much we appreciate you very much. And so for Real News 24/7, do visit us at sgtreport.com, thephaser.com, and thelibertymill.com. And please share this information. Share it with those in your sphere of influence. Pay it forward. We got to wake people up. So guys, again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, God bless. Thanks, Sophia.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
There are going to be indictments. There's going to be grand juries. John Brennan isn't going to need one lawyer. He's going to need 5.